Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the. Wait, Bailey, you wanted me to do it, right? You didn't want to.
I definitely want you to do it.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, July 23rd. Um, we technically have Bailey as the Zoom host today, so I always want to give folks the option. Um, yeah, I think we've got a pretty fun community agenda for today that is definitely not being written up at exact moment. We did, to be fair, we did have the demo. I'm just appending a little discussion that I wanted to add. One thing that Bailey is going to take us through is, as you saw last week, we've been working on a reimagined Wasm shell, which is essentially using plugins from the ground up as commands, as hooks into existing commands, and as something that you can use to implement interfaces for your like hot reload developer loop. And what Bailey started running into is like, hey, it's great to have a curl command or like a package manager install, but realistically, being a part of the CNCF and GitHub, we're installing stuff all the time in GitHub Actions, and it'd be really nice to just have a, architecture OS agnostic, just like Wasm, way to install Wash without, so that you can confidently do it on CI runs. And we've made attempts at doing this properly before, and maybe they've kind of fallen short. And Bailey, as far as I understand it, you have a lot of fun things to talk about as well as just showing this action. Yeah, I guess I'll just throw it to you for the demo.
Yeah, and I was primarily wanting to do this to try out Brooks's latest stuff on his reimagined wash. That was one of my big motivators, but I was also looking at the best way to maintain GitHub Actions for the Bytecode Alliance as well. And so I wanted to kind of, survey the landscape, learn as much as I can, and I figured now would be a good time to kind of share my exploration, some of the things I learned, and the decision criteria for what I think we should do for Wash. So first, let's do a demo, show you a version working, and then I can show you other types of versions, because I've had lots of different starts and fits on this thing. So this is a composite style action. And what I'm doing here is pretty simple in that I'm actually just wrapping an existing type of action that knows how to install to a cache with cargo install. And I'm pointing it directly at Brooks's latest and greatest so I can try things out. And if I go over here and see it run, I can see that it was successfully able to build my component and set up Wash straight from the cache. And we're all kind of familiar with Rust here, and we know that Rust compiles very slowly. So even though it was a hello world, it was 26 seconds to build. But hey, actually getting my setup Wash, just my Wash tool, didn't take too much time. It took 1 second. In comparison to if you didn't have a cache, here is your 8-minute setup Wash. And so this is what would happen to your workflow. If the first time you ran the setup wash action, it will say, oh, you don't have it, let me build it. Rust is installed on every action runner. And the way that it sets it up is it basically mounts this hosted tool cache of Wash to basically your runner. Well, in this case, it's actually mounted per workspace. And that is how it's cached. Gosh, I said workspace. I meant to say workflow. So in GitHub Actions, there's actually a couple different kinds of cache I learned, which is sort of interesting. This one is using what's called the Actions cache. So if I go to Actions cache, oop, like this, this is how provided by GitHub. And your actions themselves can interact with this directly. And so this is a nice way to cache even between your different workflows on like intermediate dependencies that you're building, like if you wanted to cache your node modules, if you were caching some of the binaries that you built, nice tool to build on top of. Um, and I found that there's another tool out in the ecosystem that builds on top of it. And it's the Tyke cache cargo install action. And it's nice in that I can uh, call through it and it will build on top of the actions cache. So we wouldn't have to write some of that cache management logic in our action steps. The downside is that it is cargo specific. So Cargo obviously is basically the package manager for Rust. And if you are trying to use wasmCloud and you're maybe not writing Rust, because we support people coming in and writing TypeScript and writing Go, coming here and looking, one, knowing to find this tool name, and then knowing the parameters that get passed in, which are very, very cargo-like. If you know cargo, this makes perfect sense. If you don't know cargo, might be a little weird. And you probably wouldn't know to like search for this to like get started with wasmCloud, right? And so I think the way of wrapping basically this action gives us the best of both worlds. It's definitely my recommended approach of, okay, we'll wrap this. We'll provide a canonical setup wash action that anybody can pull down and get started. We'll have logic for setting the right versions to be used. Any other setup stuff that we have, like let's say that maybe there's a set of default plugins, let's say, that we pull in from the work that Brooks is working on and preload, prefetch that. Maybe we have plugins as like an optional field to like let people supply as part of the workflow. Those are some of the ideas there. Why we would also still want our own custom setup wash action. Now, this is what I recommend, and you can see it working. Let me show you some of the other explorations I did and some of the things I learned. If you go to setup wash action and you just go to main, you'll see that the first thing that I did is I followed the GitHub documentation where they strongly recommend that you use a TypeScript style action. And so I used their GitHub repo template and it gave me a lot of stuff. A lot of good things, tons of different types of linting, a build so that it rolls up your action and puts it in a dist folder. So one weird thing, if you're not familiar, good and bad. One of the reasons why a TypeScript action is so recommended is that it has the least amount of startup time compared to some of the other alternatives. Like if you were to create your action as a Docker container, you gotta spin up that container. And so if we were to choose, option 3 here on the table of, well, what if we did a setup wash with Docker? Well, that would be the slowest option, kind of like the least native in the GitHub Action ecosystem. The TypeScript version, part of the reason why it starts up so fast is everything's already running with something that's got Node.js basically there. And then they just load it with .js. They're not doing any NPM kind of stuff here. It's just like straight up running your JavaScript. And so if you're doing TypeScript, you gotta bundle it up and go ahead and get it in a version. And you commit that to your main. So that's a little weird. So that's good and bad. So I'm just calling that one out. So as part of your build, you got to make sure that's up to date. And the CI that they give you a number of workflows, including checking that dist folder is up to date. It also has a ton of different types of linting, which is pretty cool. And all of it bundles up into a super linter. And that's where I found a really nice linter that was failing for me, but super linter kind of made it hard to run locally. I found the way to like Docker run super linter with all the same, set of environment variables that this template came with. But also you can just brew install actionlet and run that directly on your YAMLs. So totally recommend that. They also have a playground, which is pretty good. And you can plop it in here. You can see one of the things that I was playing around with and using that, it'll tell you, yay, you did YAML correctly, which sometimes can be kind of hard to do. And also setting up a shell for that. Now, I think the downside of doing an action this way is you can already see that I have a ton of pull requests for bumping my dependencies, because I don't just have dependencies on the TypeScript code that I'm pulling in. Here inside the package JSON, I've got, what came out of the box. Like I didn't really add much here. I was trying to follow exactly, by the book, their best practices. And it brings in quite a bit. And so then it's got to rev somewhat often. But then, in your workflows, you also are depending on other things, just Dependabot for the actual actions that you're using here. These also need to be revved and updated. Every time you see an action, think of it as third-party code that you're just bringing in. And in this scenario, I do trust GitHub Actions and GitHub's GitHub Actions, I should say. So the actions that are actually provided by GitHub, I'm sure they're auditing them. They're doing a great job on CI, CD, and making sure those are solid. Maybe Superlinter is too, but they're even more third party to me than like GitHub. And there are pretty well documented cases of why you should be pretty careful about what you're putting in your CI workflows. This was an example where it was a supply chain attack, starting with review dog action setup. But the way that it actually like made it out to the world and really started causing a targeted attack and problems was actually by a transitive action that was pulling that in and then running it itself and then exposing the secrets of any of the workflows that it was running inside of. So we care not just about like the action that we're providing in our source code and the watch that we're putting up, but also any of the actions that we're bringing in, we also need to make sure those are rock solid. So talking through, some of the basic concerns here is I want us to limit these as best we can, and where you can't, pin them. So instead of having v4 here, have the full SHA of that commit, and that's actually documented in GitHub's best practices. So I was a little surprised not to actually see it in their template itself out of the box. And then aside from that, there are some pros to going the TypeScript route. So I do want to give it a fair shake here. If you look at installing from what they provide you, there's a couple of things. So I mentioned there's a couple different kinds of caches. So one of the key reasons why you would want to do TypeScript instead of Docker or just straight YAML with Bash scripts is to be able to take advantage of their tool cache SDK. Now, their tool cache SDK is different from the one that I showed before. Before I was caching on a per workflow basis. Here, it's actually caching on a per runner basis. So if I run on a different runner, it's going to get a different tool, basically. If it had never run there before, then I'm getting that cold start. The other thing they have is a number of different kind of SDKs. This one's kind of cool in that you're able to, let me jump on down. You're able to basically call it through the REST API. Maybe we wanted to do something, this is me playing around, obviously it's commented out, but maybe we wanted to do something like searching through the available releases that we have and then finding the best fit based on the symvar that somebody passed in. And say they wanted 4.0 and we have 4.2. 4.0.2. Let's give them the latest patched version. So some of that's pretty nice. Of course, it's REST, so you can do that with anything. Any of the options also have that available. So I think a lot of that was kind of cool. I want to give a few shout outs to other things that I found. I kind of geeked out on what Victor created. So he's got, and the reason why I saw it is he was trying to create these in like a shared way that other people could build on top of it. If you want a really nice end-to-end like turnkey release pipeline, go check out what he's got going over here in Jaco GitHub Workflows. He's got it doing a release PR, being able to automatically even do and trigger the GitHub releases themselves, which was what I was just showing just there. So there's a lot I want to pull from and steal from, basically from Victor on this one. And another thing that I thought was pretty inspired was how ChainGuard manages their actions. So they've got a ton of different setup actions. And these are basically the actions that are sort of internal to their project. The ones that live here, they don't intend for other people to consume external to them. One of the key reasons for that is that there's a limitation in GitHub Marketplace where it has to be in its own repo if you want that action to be added to the GitHub Marketplace. And so you can see an example here where they had to do that for their own CLI. So I think it's called Chain Pedal. If we go here, you'll see that they ended up having to basically deprecate it and move it out. And they moved it out to this repo here, and then this is what people are using. I want to shout out that they ended up doing sort of the composite action approach, where they have where it's it's basically YAML plus shell script approach. I think their amount of actions led them to this being the best way to maintain them. So I do feel a little bit more confidence in that approach. The other thing that I thought was really cool, let me find their kind in here. that's worth shouting out is that they do composites of composites, which I think we would be into in the wasmCloud repo for composing together basically all of the, we have like the same kind of set up this, test this, do this, set up the environment, and we can kind of compose all those helpful pieces and reuse them. And if we had it in an actions repo, like what ChainGuard does here, then it'd be pretty easy to maintain because we'd be maintaining it in a central place. So I think what I want to propose we do for Wasm Cloud, sort of a hybrid of this, which is we have a main actions repo like this. We have individual repos like setup wash. Um, so that we can obviously get it into the marketplace because the whole point of wrapping that thing is to be able to, basically brand it and make it the canonical, this is how wasmCloud sets up Wash. So we would still want to be able to do this so that we can have it in the GitHub marketplace. But I think what I would propose is that we actually would submodule it in to the actions repository. If we submodule it in, the idea being we can just kind of like in one big change be like, all right, everybody that's doing it this way, we're now on this version, and these dependencies are all updated to be the same. And what I'm trying to aim for is the, walking the line for the least amount of churn and maintenance that we might end up in, and taking a lesson out of the playbook from a lot of other folks. So essentially, what I'd like to be able to do is if y'all are cool with it, I'd like to create a setup wash action that doesn't look like this big thing. Actually, you know what's fun? Let me show you the real diff between these two, because I intentionally separated it into a separate commit just so you could see. So just the step of moving to a composite action away from a TypeScript one, 47,000 lines deleted. Yeah. And the logic, obviously, for just doing that composite action is itty bitty. So I would like to put this over in wasmCloud and then I'll also use the actions like monorepo approach to help us manage these centrally. Questions?
Bailey, I probably have a dumb question, but what exactly was the 47,000 lines that were removed? Was it like package lock.json or was it
All of
like
that. Yeah. I think the action itself, which was, to be fair, what I wrote in shell script in 5 lines, it was like 300 lines of TypeScript code-ish. So, yeah, it wasn't like that whole full thing, but all of the dependencies that my TypeScript actually ended up pulling in is what Victor basically said. Is just like, there's a lot of dependencies there, and it really, really filled it in. Um, So yeah, having something that just works with the cache is nice. Having something that our end users don't have to think about for setting up the cache is really nice. Uh, I did my best on trying to understand like the two different caching approaches. Are they actually gonna in effect be the same? And my experience with it was like they were the same. Whether I was caching via tool actions or whether I was caching via the workflows actions cache.
maybe? Oh, no, Victor had a question. What about pulling down from GitHub releases if we have point Sinver and then calling back to Taiki's cache installed action? Also, there's
Yeah, so I've fussed with all of these. Where I landed is that technically the GitHub release is what we tag, right? So in my example, I was doing it off of a revision because Proxy didn't tag it. But I was rolling up a revision for that one, but we could have set a tag for what we were passing into the cargo install. And that feels releasey enough to me. And I'm okay with, I think, an end user that's setting up CI to have an initial cold start. Because, everybody kind of expects that for the first round and then it quickly installing. But yeah, what I kind of wanted, Victor, I don't know if you've got audio rolling, but what I expected to see from Taiki was binstall with cache. But the binstall doesn't come with cache, and that's annoying, and it totally could. I think that would give you the best of both worlds.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, it definitely doesn't come with cache. But I think you could probably layer them. Like there's a if they've got a right, like if you've got like a specific Semper version, if it's not some like crazy range or something like that, then you can try like successively slower approaches basically, and then if you just like dump out to um the full build, then you might be able to get faster. Another edge to this is the platform support. 'Cause I think most of these options will support all the platforms that are like possible, if that makes sense. But
Taiki did a great job. In the Taiki
yeah,
install action, he's got it where it validates all of the GitHub Action runners, which is definitely a
yeah,
way smaller set than like, the actual mix and match of operating systems and platform architectures. But it's a
and
good call
Wash
out if
has
somebody was trying to do a self-hosted runner on like an Android device or something.
yeah, and Wash. I think Wash is in binstall, so like Wash is like
Hmm.
binstall ready. So
Yeah, Jonas added that.
yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of like ways to do it, and some of them are more insecure than others. But yeah, this is awesome to see as an option.
Yeah, I think we got to decide how much we care about cold start, I guess, and then it would be worth exploring the layered. But also, probably wouldn't take that much time to try it out either. Um, Probably also wouldn't be too bad actually for me to just write the shell script that adds it to the actions cache. Now that I'm saying that, like the distance between actions cache with
No,
binstall
let
is
me
actually
stop.
pretty
Let me stop you
small.
right there. Don't Let's not write shell scripts. You
I don't
can
know,
stop. You
man.
can cut that off.
I went from like, oh, I'm gonna do the TypeScript thing and I'm gonna follow linting and best practices, and then, I was like, wow, this is the development environment for some people. It's not that it's not nice either. Yeah. I'm only talking like maybe 20 lines of bash. Is that 20 lines too long of bash? I'm not sure. Um,
No, no, it's
you
probably
like
fine.
YAML better?
No, I mean it's like it's probably fine. I feel like it's not a huge deal. But the longer it gets, basically, the worse the worse it is, and then you wish you
Right.
had something more powerful. But anyway, yeah, this is. I mean, having this like just consistent for everybody is going to be really, I think, productive. It's going to be a lot more productive than just trying to like pull wash from wherever.
There is one more thing I forgot to call out. If you look at how Taiki handles this, he's got pre.shell here, which is basically a shell script that is only for parsing effectively its inputs and then re-exporting those. It does some validation, right, on like, is this available? Is it a stable version? This is definitely where we could, the style of things is something that I think we should probably copy. So this is how it re-exports basically all the inputs to the workflow. And the reason for that is well documented here in the GitHub documentation, which is basically you always sort of want to use an intermediate because there are plenty of cases, again, where folks are trying to target GitHub Actions for injection techniques. And so this is one where it defended against it because it had an intermediate environment variable. So right now I'm obviously not doing that. I'm totally just counting on Taiki's install action to do that for us. But if we were to add more stuff, we would definitely want to have basically this pre-step for all of those as well. So I would say that this is getting into the too many lines of bash for me. That's a lot of bash. But at the same time, if it's saving us any type of security vulnerability, would be worth it. So the more we add there, obviously, then things like this start to become more important. Did I show you enough YAML and bash today?
Sounds like not enough bash.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, Bailey, everybody else, please feel free to ask questions and everything. Bailey, really only question that I have is uh it- maybe you talked about it in the beginning, but the repository naming structure is very particular.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, with this wash action, where does it land? Like I know that you've been like working through this, does this go into the, we keep this in like its own org? Will it go into like wasmCloud common actions? Does it just go sit alongside our monorepo? Yeah, where will this go?
Yeah, I thought through how I want to run this for the Bytecode Alliance org, the wasmCloud org, and also the WASI, basically the WebAssembly org, but for the WASI projects within the WebAssembly org. And so I evaluated how a lot of different projects do this. If you look at the top 20 actions on GitHub Marketplace, they don't do what I'm going to recommend. They all say setup and then tool. Now I will say like 70% of those do the version as like wash hyphen version because a lot of them have potentially more things that might have a version in it. And so a lot of them have landed on that kind of naming for the version parameter that comes in. So I would definitely recommend that we prefix the version or any of our inputs that might collide, but definitely it will say wash version. Uh, but the other thing for the repository name, I recommend doing what Docker does, which is having a hyphen action at the end of the repository name. And obviously, because it tells you what it is, it does feel a bit like stutter when you're like, but it's the setup wash action, which, I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but where I landed was that because I think I would recommend that we put it in the wasmCloud organization because it's a CNCF org. I want people to feel like, obviously I was doing it over in Cosmonic Labs because that's our playground. But I would like it to be upstreamed in CNCF managed with open governance because these GitHub actions have a way of being pretty foundational to how people build and consume our software. Same thing with Bytecode Alliance. The key reason why I don't want the Bytecode Alliance to have a separate like Bytecode Alliance actions is that it makes it unclear where the open governance applies. And if something weird were to happen, like maintainer had to go away on that kind of stuff, who is going to step in and take that over? And luckily we've got a ladder inside our CNCF wasmCloud, and then we would also have that inside the Bytecode Alliance. So I opted not to set up a separate actions organization, although it sure is tempting because I think that is a pattern that a lot of people have, and it kind of would be fun to name squat WebAssembly actions. But please somebody don't steal that from me now that I said it out loud. But I'm opting not to do that. I would like it to be wasmCloud actions with setup wash action as a second repository that is submoduled into wasmCloud / actions.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any objections. Yeah. I guess if anybody has objections, speak your mind. But Bailey, just let us know if you need permission to create any repos or whatever, I guess.
Yeah, and I think instead of transferring this repo, since what ends up getting transferred is actually this big, I'm just gonna start fresh so you don't deal with any of my history of let's try this now. What does this linter do?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that seems reasonable. Cool. Well, unless there are any other questions. Thanks, Bailey. Good stuff. Actions galore. All right. Well, on next on the docket, we actually have I guess it's a discussion because it's more the musings of a rambling Rust engineer than it is a demo because I broke something and I can't show you the demo, but I can bring it to you next week unless Mike is doing an awesome demo again. This is actually, I wanted to do a little bit of a discussion around the clap integration that I've gotten working for the plugin system. So last week I talked a little bit about Wash and how you can use plugins in Wash to implement top level subcommands, and how you can use plugins in Wash to implement hooks that like either register exports for a developer loop so you can implement your own custom interfaces using components, which is really cool, or so that you can say before a component gets pushed up to an OCI registry, you could like attach an additional annotation as a part of a plugin because it's what you expect. I'm just making things up. We'll have to come up with more and more examples about where it makes sense. The one I shared last week is before the developer loop starts, you run a container on the host system to like stand up the observability stack, which I thought was a pretty cool use case. But I wanted to talk through some of the cleanup that I've been working on Wash, essentially trying to prepare it for making a big old pull request into the um, well, I guess we'll talk about this, but into the wasmCloud organization somewhere. And as a part of that, and with like wrapping up the plugin implementation, I did some fun things with Clap. And if you haven't worked in the Rust ecosystem, Clap is the command line argument parser. It's like the de facto. I guess there's probably other options, but it's the de facto for parsing command line arguments. So if I run my wash right now, I guess I could do, target release wash for fun things. Why not? You can see a pretty similar list of commands that you saw last week. That nothing big has come here on the top level commands. But now we have something pretty neat, and I'll just show you what this looks like, and then we'll talk about it. So if I install a plugin, and as a reminder, plugins can be installed from the local disk or from an OCI reference. So, right now I'm pointing locally at a WebAssembly component, but this could be something that's published up, and that's how people will probably install plugins anyways. I can, let's say, list this plugin, and no secrets about what the demo is going to look like next week, but yeah, it'll be pretty cool. I had this OAuth plugin that has a subcommand called run, and it runs an OAuth 2 server for like doing that kind of handshake. So great. I can see I have that plugin, but I don't actually really know how to invoke it. I don't really know like what I did, but I installed it. So if I just run wash now, you can see that we've done something kind of cool. Now there's this extra heading over here for plugins. Now, this is maybe a little bit different than how other plugin systems work. It we could list this in line just as well. I actually am interested in what folks' feedback is here, but I do like the kind of delineation here of like, here's your plugins that you have installed. And this isn't really something that Clap supports natively, and that was the fun thing. But say, okay, I installed my OAuth plugin. What do I do? How do I use this OAuth plugin? Okay, great. Here's the description. Here's how I can actually run it. And it has one subcommand inside of this actually plugin command called run. So cool. Let's check out run. Now, okay, inside this run, same kind of description, but here's the actual usage. So I can use all the same top level commands that I'm used to using with Wash, like output and log level and verbose. But now this command actually has, you can say to run on a specific port, and then you can supply your own client ID in secret. And the cool thing about this is that is also hooks into Clap's parsing of environment variables. So commands can specify their own environment variables to hook into to actually create or fill in these values. So I guess I could test this. I think Clap does this. If I wanted to set my client ID to be, community call or something, run this help again, you can see, hey, there's the actual value. I'm going to use this when I run. And this is really important. This wasn't originally in the plugin RFC or in what I showed you last week, but this is really important for like client secrets, right? We don't want to supply that on the command line because it'll go in your shell history. And if you're scripting this, maybe you could pull this directly from, GitHub secret or something like that. So this was really cool to see this work with the command system. And I'll show you what this looks like in the WIT first. So all of your command arguments, these are your positional CLI arguments and flags. You can specify a name and a description, an environment variable to use for that flag, whether or not there's a default value. If there is, then the argument's optional. And then the final value, this is a little awkward, but it has to be optional because you don't want to supply it, but clap will replace it when we actually go to running the command. And then, yeah, to show you what this actually looks like, I actually have implemented this plugin, this OAuth plugin, which sorry, I can't show you because I'm bad. But I've implemented this OAuth plugin in Go and compiled it using TinyGo. And in order to do this, it just needs to, in order to be a wash plugin, it just has to export the plugin interface, which includes supplying metadata, being initialized, running a command, or using a hook. So here's the example of client ID and client secret. Tuples are maybe a little bit weird in Go because there's not a official like tuple type. But hey, we deal with it. So I can say that I have this command argument called client ID. Here's the name, here's the description, here's the environment variable to parse from. And then I'm sorry, I think I'm missing chat. Okay. Client ID, and then whether there's defaults or default values. So these two arguments are actually required. So if I specify the client ID, but I don't specify the client secret, you get the really, really nice clap help like, hey, you didn't supply this required argument. So this plugin system, the plugins that you have as commands and wash are directly linked in to the parsing of the wash command line flags. And this was actually really nice to set up. I wanted to just talk about how, and then I will, and then we'll talk about it. So in Rust, when you're working with WebAssembly, you generate the Rust code, the Rust bindings for the WebAssembly types, the component types and component function signatures. And so this inside of the WebAssembly interface types, we have this command structure, which is used to make a CLI command, and then the arguments structure or records, which is for every argument. So in Rust, I can actually do this implementation converting the WIT type command argument to a clap argument. And so this conversion, I'm zoomed in like 14 times and it fits all on one screen. It's really easy. We set up a new argument, we set up the help text and whether or not it's required, and then we can add in, default values and environment variables. And then really similar thing for clap commands. So, we can add the about text, whether or not you need to have a subcommand, and then we can register all of the either top level arguments, or if it's a subcommand, all of the subcommand arguments. And last but not least, the way that we kind of inject this into the command line parsing is using we're kind of using a mix of the derive and the command APIs here for clap, but essentially for every plugin that we have that is a command plugin, we register those subcommands, register those plugins as subcommands, which is it's really simple. But this is a sneaky little hack, which is kind of fun. So in clap, when you have all of the subcommands go under the same heading, all of them do, you can rename this heading. So you could call it like wash commands or I'm really cool or whatever. You can rename that, but you only get one. You get the usage of the command, you get the options, and then you get the subcommands. And you can for this generated help text, you could just like disable it and then write your own. This is actually what we did with like wash, the wasmCloud shell, but that kind of stinks. So really the only thing that I want is after all these commands to display the plugins that are installed. And so I did a little hacky where I register this fake ghost command with clap, and its command name is a new line and then an underlined plugins. And then the about is also a new line. So this right here is basically filling in this fake command, which I think looks kind of nice. I'm not so proud of the hack that I don't want to take it out if people have feedback that they don't really like these being separate. But I thought it was neat since I like found forum posts from years ago about how to do this and clap, and there wasn't really a way. So yeah, I think that is really all just to say that the command line experience for plugins is really coming along nicely. That's not a thing. Really coming along nicely. It's integrated really well into like the natural CLI feel of Wash. And with commands, you can specify, your own arguments and flags and subcommands, and it all shows up really nicely in the regular output for clap. Yeah, happy to take any questions here. But really, maybe the only last thing that I'll share is if we inspect this plugin that I installed, really the only requirement for a component to be registered as a command or to participate in the Wash plugin system is to export this interface wasmCloud Wash plugin, whatever, which is going through a lot of iterations right now. But once we settle on a nice API, which I'll put up for a proposal, we can kind of lock this in at like a 010 and then handle like backwards compatible changes. Yeah, everything else, plugins have access to WASI 0.2, WASI HTTP, and WASI config runtime and WASI logging. So pretty cool. Yeah, next week I should have a little bit better, a little bit cooler of an example to show you of the plugin. But hopefully this will be nice and informative for folks looking for like a TinyGo example. I'll have to do this in TypeScript too, just to round it all out. But yeah, I see in the chat, for what it's worth, keeping plugins as a separate heading seems fine. Cool. I easily know what I added beyond out of the box wash CLI. That was my thought. If you have, you can really easily see the list of different commands that you have installed. I can't really think of a reasoning that like I would feel really strongly that it's got to be in the same list, other than maybe people don't need to like know what's a plugin and what's not. But um, you know, it feels like a whatever. Um, other prior art in the ecosystem, I think Spin's plugin system, they like add a little asterisk or something in front of the plugin to show that it's a plugin. So um, you know, other prior art that I was looking at, there is some kind of denotation that you're running a plugin, which I think is at least nice so that we can point out like built-ins versus plugins. Um, Bailey, what happens for plugins that are hooks off of commands? Would they also appear in the plugins list, or do they appear if you got the help text of the command, e.g. wash build dash just help? Good question. So right now they do appear at like in the plugin list. If you list them, well, hey, why talk when can show? If you do a wash plugin install, actually that might be bad. Wash plugin install plugin Spire Hotel target Wasm release dot Wasm. Please work. No, I need to build it. like I said, I changed the wit interface a little bit. So it oh no, it may not build. All right. If it doesn't build, then we're not gonna freak out. Okay, so what it will do is show the hook types that it like when it participates in the wash lifecycle in the plugin list instead of showing the subcommand. Um, and but right now it doesn't show in the clap help text of the command. Um, that would be a really interesting, like, here. I don't know why I keep giving everybody whiplash. That would be a really interesting, like, experience to have, like, before, like, Aspire Hotel runs an hotel dashboard. Is this the kind of thing that you're thinking, like, hey, that'd be kind of cool?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was wondering. I also just would want it to be consistent, you know? I think there might also be a world where there are, is this a world? I might be making random things up. I was like, is it possible that you could have before hooks that are part of Wash that aren't plugins? I don't think we would ever do that. So anytime you see before and after, you probably know that it's a plugin. But yeah, I like that highlighting that it's a plugin as something that maybe be aware of. But then I also totally agree with what Mike is thinking here, where like instead of it, well, yeah, I think what you have here is probably the best. I'm brainstorming on the fly, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this would be really nice to show. Um, to show one thing that I haven't really talked about or brainstormed is like ordering of hooks, right? Like ideally you could maybe want to dictate the order in which they run. Right now it's just I think the order that you installed them, which is probably it's either that or the name order. Um, but I think this would be a really cool way to be clear about when things run at what time. Hmm.
Yeah, I know a cargo doesn't have a very good plugin story, right? I have experienced the side of where most people ended up wrapping it with a meta command, like cargo component, and that had its own problems. What I'm kind of thinking about here is I want to know what's a plugin. I want to be able to know where I got it from, and I need to know if it's a before or after. When I'm looking at cargo or when I'm looking at wash build, on wash build, I do want to see like what's going to show up and what's available to me because maybe you would disable some of those in the wash configuration directory for that specific project too. So you might have a wash that has those, but they don't always run.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that like all kinds of things, yeah, all kinds of things like this are so specific to like a plugin knee style use case. So I hope that we have enough like configurability to let you do that. But if not, then I know there's going to be a ton of feature requests and fun things to work on here too. Um, Yeah, Masood, you had a really good question too. How can users trust a plugin that they pull in? And I think that this is, I think it's twofold for sure. One thing that we could certainly use to, um, one thing that you can certainly use to help facilitate this is the ability to inspect a component. So, here. Let me show. So if you're looking at installing a plugin, this works with OCI references too. You can inspect it to see exactly what capabilities it's planning on using at runtime. Now, this doesn't necessarily lead to like a trust or not, but if you look at this and you see that, hey, it's going to be making outgoing HTTP requests, it's going to be spinning up an HTTP handler, this may be something that you think like, why is it making outbound HTTP requests? This is just a emoji generator plugin. Those kinds of things can help give you at least a little clue. Um, The good thing is that we are executing all of these plugins in the bounds of the Wasm sandbox, right? So one, when you're pulling it down to install the plugin, you know that it is a valid WebAssembly component. That's the only context that it can execute in. Two, WASI CTX. Each plugin, when you're running as a command, each plugin, come on, here we go. Each plugin gets its own, this isn't exactly it, but what have you, gets its own directory that it has rewrite permissions in, but it doesn't have access to your whole file system. And, this is to facilitate plugins being able to like write files for later reference or maybe, cache expensive operations, but it's in its own little place. So it can't, read your Etsy password or whatever. Um, I think that really leaning into the permissions model of a WebAssembly component is the best way for us to make sure that it can be trusted. And then secondary to that, you can always do I'll show you something cool, which this is a command that I've been working on, the plugin test command. I hope I didn't break anything. No. Uh, what? You can always use, oh, come on, that's not right. Okay, well, I'll follow with this for a second, but the purpose of this button is you can use the plugin test command to actually check the metadata, see what a plugin is planning on doing before you install it. So this is a flow that I was hoping to use as essentially an entry point where you can run a plugin test, dash dash help. Let's see what the actual, I'll try command too. Let's see what the actual capabilities are in this plugin. And then, what is it going to try to do? When is it going to run? And then you can install it later on. That's also part of the point in the WIT world for specifying who you can contact about the plugin, where you can find the source code, what's the license, all that stuff, so that feasibly you could track back the plugin to its source code and take a look. Of course, there's other things that we could probably do there around, cosign and using some existing tools in the ecosystem with OCI references to make sure that you're getting like a trusted thing, but it comes down to maybe who you trust. Masood, did I answer your question slash do you have other concerns? Like, is that enough, or would you like to see a little bit more on the trust side?
I think there's so much more to add, Brooks. Sorry to
I'm
get in
sure.
here.
I'm sure.
I think talking about what pre-opens a component is allowed to have is pretty critical here. So what files and directories it's allowed to access. We could do capability-driven security just on that aspect alone is pretty important. What you were showing there with an OAuth secret and writing that to disk, I would only want that plugin basically to be able to read from that. And then I need an auditability trail for anything else that might mess with that, right? So I think locking down and having a really good write-up on how our pre-opens works here in this case. Plugins not being able to read or author to other plugins directories that they have access to is important. Environment variables that are created by one, I would want to be able to effectively have provenance. This WASI CLI environment came from this plugin versus just globally passing the whole set all around all the time. Being specific for which environment keys are passed in, I think, is another key. I think the other power sauce here that we can learn from existing plugin systems, like I really like Crew. I think that's done an amazing job, and I posted a link to where it has plenty of examples of CVEs that are just floating about and existing plugins. Luckily, it looked like they didn't find any criticals or highs, so that part's good, but just like anything, you are pulling it down and letting it write to disk, so it's not exactly a sandbox in that world. Um, and so if you look at how they manage this, it's minifold, right? OCI signing, I think, is a great way to do it. I think we should have that. Having a place for effectively a marketplace where we can kind of show that it's been audited, who it's by what organization as another key. Like I think, just like I was saying, generally I trust GitHub Actions coming from the Actions org. I would also feel great about wasmCloud Actions, but maybe the wasmCloud community contributed ones that are in contrib, that's maybe a little bit more Wild West. So showing, what org they came from and where they're maintained is important too. Sorry, Masood, I'm sure you have more too.
No, actually, I have to drop for a meeting, unfortunately, but I just wanted to say in regards to the combination that you said is great. But, especially when you're considering that the plugins will be used in all environments, especially including enterprise environment. One way would be that, let's say those permissions that you said, if they could live on the wash side, that you can, let's say, blanket say that, for example, pre-opens are not allowed in this environment. No access to disk. So rule it out instead of one by one looking at what the plugin configures. That gives people confidence to say that, depending on their environment, it's my dev environment, it's my personal environment, the level of comfort, the type of regulations that they might have, all of that will help people to kind of manage this more securely. Of course, supply chain, cosign, all those sorts of things tie into this, but the end result is that plugin itself, do we trust it to, for example, manage our secrets?
Yeah, I love that idea. It matches up with WASI's, everything really well, where, you should be able to use wash configuration to blanket allow or disallow certain APIs from reaching plugin components, or maybe in a specific context, allow them, in an enterprise, just like all the plugins we got, no outbound HTTP, no file system access, no environment parsing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think this is really, really awesome. Um, that's really great feedback. So I took down that note, and I'll make sure to keep it in the when we actually come to contribute this, like in the here's the security boundaries, and then maybe it won't be in there in the first iteration, but a follow up, it makes a ton of sense. All right, y'all. Well, I think it's about time. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming and hearing about GitHub Actions and command line parsing. Very exciting stuff here. It is actually exciting. Come on. But thanks everybody for coming this week. Great to see everybody's face. And hey, we'll see you next week for another fun wasmCloud Wednesday.